what I've seen in most companies is there is not a cohesive enterprise data strategy. Business functions are trying to react to different things. So you have these silos building up. Some organizations have taken the leap of having an enterprise data strategy, but I think every organization actually has to evolve to that, especially in this new AI world.
Hi, I'm Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, the international nonprofit trade association for CMOs who are focused on architecting a new future of marketing.
I'm Rex Briggs, an author, market researcher, measurement inventor, and entrepreneur. I'm Rex Briggs, an author, artificial intelligence researcher, and entrepreneur.
Yeah, this is Greg Stewart, CEO of MMA Global, and this is Decoding AI for Marketing.
Hi, this is Ratnakar Lavu. I'm a startup advisor and previously the chief digital information officer for Nike.
Oh, I was gonna introduce you, Ratnakar. I'm gonna welcome you in. You get to come in here, okay? But listen, it is Ratnakar Lavu. Listen, Ratnakar and I know each other though because he was one of the, Ratnakar. You were like one of the founding members of the MMA's Chief Digital Officer Board, I think. Correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And I think what's interesting about this one, just to set the stage, and Rex, I'll turn it over to you to kind of start off here with questions. But Ratnakar is actually he's a real tech guy, so this is not those fluffy marketing people anymore. Here, we're going to get real about somebody who really knows what they're talking about and understand this. And I think some of your background, you were chief technology officer at Kohl's before you then became chief digital and information officer at Nike?
Chief digital information officer at Nike.
Yeah. No, he's real stuff. And you did that job during the pandemic, which I think some of our conversation is going to talk about today, right?
Yeah, that's great. Good. Looking forward to it.
Good.
Well, and speaking of the pandemic, I mean, that was an amazing accelerant to e-commerce trends that were already sort of underway. I mean, the clicks and bricks has been talked about forever, but my God, what an accelerant and what an exciting time, and challenging time to be in that space. I'd love to have you start off with telling us a bit about how the journey you were already on or the industry was already on, how that was an accelerant, and then what comes next.
Yeah, actually, thanks, Rex, for that question. During the pandemic, most industries had to deal with not being in a physical environment and then trying to connect with consumers through the digital ecosystem. What happened at that time was the digital ecosystems in many organizations were in their nascent stages. So they had to really build quick capabilities to be able to actually meet the consumer where they wanted to or where they were available at that time. And so things like digital marketing capabilities, digital customer service capabilities, digital commerce capabilities, all had to be upgraded. And by the way, fulfillment also had to be upgraded at that point. So what actually happened, what we saw was the consumers quickly shifted because of the pandemic to actually connecting with brands only through the digital experiences in the first kind of year and a half to 2 years of the pandemic, which then meant that the brands actually had to scale up both their digital ecosystems, but also build new capabilities to meet the customer needs. And that's where a majority of the effort was spent during the first 2 years of the pandemic. Then what happened is, as you can imagine, over the last year and a half, there's another big shift that is happening, which is generative AI that came into play. Now brands have to accelerate and keep up with the whole generative AI kind of ecosystem, as well as how to connect consumers leveraging AI, as well as their digital ecosystems that they're building out right now. So that's a little bit more complex than what we had pre-pandemic, but that's what organizations need to keep up with right now.
Well, and then on top of that,
hey Rex, have him explain what is a generative AI ecosystem? Can you give a context to that? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So what has happened with the generative AI ecosystem that ChatGPT and others have built out is they have fundamentally changed how consumers can experience either a brand or an information. So by that I mean, you used to actually search on information or you used to browse information. Now you actually can go to something like a chat GPT, type in a prompt, and get all the information and insights that you need. So then the real question is, how do actually brands embrace that new way of consumers both getting information and interacting with brands in the future? Because if they don't and they stay more legacy, what I call legacy, which is browse, search, and checkout, that's usually what most digital experiences are. And then there will be other brands that probably will embrace AI that will provide a better, more engaging experience for consumers. And that's the shift that brands have to go through.
Well, and there's another part of that generative AI part with Bard where you can take a picture of something and it can recognize the picture. But I found that
Exactly.
it's not great at recognizing brands. So it's not encoded to say, oh, that shirt is from such and such a brand. I happen to like Viore. So, but if I take a polo shirt, it looks like any other polo shirt. It doesn't differentiate. So I imagine that there's this whole other idea going on, which is how do we get our visual identity to become part of what the large language models are returning when they take an image back.
Right,
Yeah.
So have you?
could have Nike or Kohl sort of manipulated those, for example, not to pick on, a former company, but like, could they manipulate the models to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, or to
Yeah.
say, hey, you can buy this shirt, like Fiore, you can buy it from their store, or you can buy it at REI or other places. I mean, so who's now bidding for that, or how does that work? I don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping that you can give us some insight on where that goes and how you advise companies to think about this space.
Yeah. By the way, the space is evolving and evolving very fast. So not everyone has all the answers. But here's the way to think about, kind of the generative AI or large language model space. One is there's a large language models which are public. They have a lot of information that they have accumulated through the internet. But what they don't understand is the domain itself or the brand itself. And hence, there's going to be either fine tuning or training of a model related to a particular brand, particular domain, well, call it retail or healthcare, whatever it is, the domain is, right? And that has to happen so that there is more awareness of the nuances of the brand, and also the nuances of how the brand kind of communicates things to their customers. And that's the process that we call it as domain specific models. And those are things that have to continue to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. So on the shopping part here, when you think about this domain specific model, you have, what is the object? Like, again, I'll stay with the polo shirt. But then the idea, depending on how I've asked the question, if I'm asking where can I buy it, now you have to have a whole nother set of data that's a whole distribution network that's now attached to it that these
Correct.
models wouldn't normally know unless you built a domain specific model. So tell us a little bit more about how you go about building a domain specific model in retail these days.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So there's always this conundrum of build versus buy, public versus private kind of models that is going on. At this stage, in terms of where LLMs and Chat GPT and others are evolving, a brand, depending on what their needs are, they can actually leverage a more of a open source private model. And then what they'll have to do with that model is actually train it with their brand data. It could be all unstructured data. So think about brand guidelines, different documents about the brand. They'll have to fine tune it or train it. And then what they can do is they can leverage that to create customer experiences on their own sites, but eventually also leverage it for creating ads and other things. So today you can actually leverage AI to create copy. You can also leverage AI to create content, advertising content. Now, there'll always be this human and AI kind of connection point. So more of AI, human AI assisted kind of human interactions that are going to be there. And then what's going to happen is they can leverage that content and copy and data to then provide the right experiences, whether it's on their own channels or on third-party channels.
But listen, Ratnakar, Rex? I'm not sure if this is where you were going, but I was sort of wondering if ChatGPT or whatever comes along after that, right? I don't think we've seen the killer app
Exactly.
yet. I don't think we've seen the Uber of mobile. We haven't seen the Uber of AI yet. I don't think we know.
Right.
Okay, okay. But if I'm gonna interact through machines don't necessarily. How do I persuade a machine to have brand preference on my behalf?
Oh, you're talking about buyer agents now interacting with AI agents from the e-commerce one.
I mean, that's kind of interesting because if I'm going to get my information from ChatGPT, which is what you said, Radhikar, right? And then it's
Right.
not going to have. How would a Nike, a big brand? Let's just we'll just pick on Nike. You don't have to talk about Nike. You're not there, so I don't need you to talk about that. But how does a big brand like that actually influence the machines and then sort of tilt in their direction? And are there
Yeah.
efforts? Do you think there's efforts on that right now?
Well, I think again that's very nascent right now, right? So, for example, if you think about, there are going to be always third-party platforms like Google and others who
Yeah.
will apply generative AI and AI itself to continue to improve the search results, and they will always have. There's going to be more kind of association to relevance for the individual. So,
Okay.
so hence,
Okay.
content copy and information of the brand become more important as you're publishing it to third-party platforms like Google and others, right? Now, there's also going to be brand-owned platforms, their own digital experiences that have to continue to evolve, because what is going to happen is as consumers interact with experiences like ChatGPT, which are going to make it easy for consumers to get information, to understand, what is it that they want, to navigate, to continue to ask the LLM for all the details that they want. The brand's own digital platforms will have to continue to improve, because think
Mm-hmm.
about the elaborate navigation that we do today, when you
Yep.
have thousands of products there, and then you're trying to look at which product is actually right. So there's both going to be the art and the science that's still going to continue to exist, which is the science component is I just want to quickly type something and I want to get the products that are relevant to me. There's also going to be the art piece of it. Hey,
Right.
I want to be able to continue to promote to consumers certain things that I believe, either as a merchant or a marketer, that are going to connect with them, because no machine can actually really think through those pieces as well. And that's also going to be there as part of the experience. So, to bring it back to your question, I think we're still in the early stages of this whole evolution, and I think there's going to be more of how do you interact with third party platforms to make sure your brand is continuing to be relevant to all the consumers who might want to choose your brand, but also how do you evolve your own platform to create the best experience for your consumers.
So you're advising retailers and businesses now. What are you telling them to do first, second, and third? What's that crawl, walk, run strategy to get to a place where you're a master of these technologies?
Yeah, so I think first, I'll take it in like different components of things. One is, understand first, what is actually being built or evolved in the ecosystem, because you don't have to build everything from scratch right now. For example, you don't have to build a large language model from scratch. That'll be too much effort, too much money to do that, right? Leverage what is there. First, understand what's there, leverage what is there, and try to kind of integrate, because not everything is built out well. You'll have to integrate because there are different solutions for copy, there are different solutions for content, there are different solutions for open source large language models. So you have to think about how to take these different solutions and figure out an integration pattern that works for your brand. whether the integration pattern is to streamline better processes across, let's say, your marketing ecosystem or your commerce ecosystem. The second thing is, no matter what it is, you have to focus on data. So
Yeah.
data is
Yeah.
going to be the critical thing that is either going to make this successful or not. And the reason is bad data will end up in bad results anyway, whether it's internal or a third-party platform. So, and in data, I think about three things: capture, organize, and then think about action or insights. So that's the way to think about data. Make sure you're capturing the right data, because these AI models, the more data and insights that you feed, the better they are. So capture the right data, make sure it's organized well. So we always talk about customer 360, but then you have to make sure that every customer and their interactions and other things are organized in the right way so that the AI can pick it up, right? And
Well, and
then
just pause on that point because that we need to come back to that organized part because that is a massive mental shift for how most companies have thought about organizing data. The large language models need XY pairs, and most people just don't have their data organized that. So continue on the other one, but I want you to come back and talk more about that organized part because
yeah,
that's a big
and we'll
change.
definitely come back to that. It's a great
Yeah.
point. And then the action or component or insights component of it is, what action do you want to take with that? Do you want to automate kind of sending a marketing email? Or do you want to automate doing recommendations and things like that, right? So that's the data. Then on top of the data, you actually put some AI models. Now, there are again different things that you can do there. There are recommendation models that are publicly available, or you can build your own models. But then understand that you'll have to build your models, you have to train it, you have to then deploy them. So having that ecosystem of how to build, test, and deploy models, so that's the AI layer. Then on top of that is experience layer. And the experience layer is a large language model experience layer, or an experience layer could be a digital layer with a large language model. For example, a digital layer is change the search box to be a large language model kind of prompt, right? Instead of using a search engine that we all used to use in the past. And so that's the way to think about this. And then you actually have to observe insight, because, by the way, the insights have to be fed back into the data, which then the AI can be trained to understand, hey, whatever you suggested is working or not. And then kind of you rinse and repeat that to get better in terms of your customer experiences.
Hey, Ratnakar, I'm curious, where do you think marketers and big companies or enterprises are in terms of being data ready? What kind of
Um,
grade? What grade would you give them, or what percent to readiness are they? Because I mean, by the way, the MMA's position is they're not very far, and they're not really making aggressive efforts in the last couple of years.
Yeah, what I've seen in most companies is there is not a cohesive enterprise data strategy. And what actually happens is, and because business functions are trying to react to different things, so you'll have different business organization. Take, for example, marketing is reacting to, hey, I just need customer data. And I want to be able to build a model, what I consider 360, and then I want to be able to kind of just interact with third party to actually do the advertising and marketing and other things. Then you have customer service who says, no, 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 I need my own customer data to actually, service the customer. Then you have logistics; they have their own customer data. So you have these silos building up within organization. The true data strategy is, how do you build what we call as a data lake, but how do you build a enterprise data platform? That's the way I like to think about this, wherein again all capture goes into that platform, no matter from which touch point it is physical, digital, third party, whatever it is. And you have a team that, from an enterprise level, from a data governance and a data strategy standpoint, does help with the organization, because organized data is actually the best thing for an AI. and unorganized data and different kind of, because AI can infer different things very quickly. And if it's not organized well, it can actually do a wrong inference begin with. So organize it well with a team. And so there should be an enterprise data strategy that says, okay, here's how we're going to organize it. Do we all agree on that? And then you say, okay, what are you going to actually apply that data for? So to come back to your question, I think many organizations are still in these data silos. Some organizations have taken the leap of having an enterprise data strategy, but I think every organization actually has to evolve to that, especially in this new AI world.
Yeah, I think AI is going to save a lot of time and money and bring a lot of productivity, but first it's going to take a lot more work and money,
Exactly.
right, and
Exactly,
time.
exactly.
So
That
it's
is the whole thing. I mean, it's going to be a big lift, actually. It's a great point, Rex. It's going to be a big lift for organization. Again, what I think will end up happening is if you don't have the right kind of strategic thought process across the enterprise or the company, you will start seeing AI kind of initiatives across different organizations in silos. Again, different data silos that'll happen. And then you'll be like, okay, why are they not all connected? Why is it that they're not working well? And then I think they'll all have to come together anyway.
yeah, you've
Wow,
got the
boy, we've
risk
really
of. Oh, go ahead,
we got
Greg.
a. Well, I was going to say we got kind of a mess ahead of us then, don't we? Hey, Ratnakar, who's gonna? I mean, who's going to organize that? I mean, who's got the clout, the power? I mean, I don't see boards doing it. They're going to be probably a little outside of that. CEOs, depending on their orientation, may or may not get the importance of that, or there's sufficient systems. I mean, CTO should do it, right? In your sort of past background, but I
Yeah,
don't. Do they always take the leadership role? I don't know.
yeah. I think the organizations will have to evolve into. Here's a thing that I've always believed in, which is companies that embrace technology and embrace technology for transformation are going to be leading the pack in terms of just overall kind of growth and profitability and other things, right? Because if you see now, more and more technology is kind of at the center of all the elements of the transformation pieces of it. What is going to happen actually with AI is that's going to even accelerate further, because AI is just not a simple, hey, let's actually just implement this one SaaS solution and everything will work kind of thing. You actually have to understand, because if you don't, again, the inferences could be very different. You'll have to understand why an AI made a certain recommendation, and things like that, right? So you actually have to have the technical chops to be able to do that. So either a CTO or a CDIO in certain organizations, whoever the technology organization head is, along with, but technology for the sake of technology does not work, along with a business strategy person of some sort, whether it could be in the marketing organization, whether it could be the digital organization or the CEO's office. We're kind of combining the forces because you want to understand how the AI and the technology capabilities are going to drive the business growth. And those two have to map together. And that's the key, I think.
I like that way of thinking about it. It does suggest to me that there are really three simultaneous horizons you have to work on. There's some immediate wins that you can have. I mean, your point about changing the search bar to go to use some type of vector database and semantic search instead, that's an easy win. You
Easy.
do that tomorrow, right? Or
Exactly.
changing your chatbot as well. We've got some really dumb chatbots. And again, if
Exactly.
you connect it to a vector database and large language model, it's instantly the IQ goes up like 50, 60 points on your chatbots. So those are ones like, okay, just do it quickly. You already have all the content. You can organize that and cut through your data very quickly and put it into production. But then you've got this bigger point that you're making that you really got me thinking about, which is organizing your data strategy so that you don't end up with these different silos and fracturing of
Right.
all the output that you can create. And it is a different organization. I'm looking at one company's data. They've got 5,000 different data points, and it's very structured survey data, and it doesn't go into a large language model very easily because it's just too much data for the large language model. And so they have to break it down and give it into a conversational format. It's a totally different way of thinking about structuring your data so it's useful.
Right.
But you can imagine different people doing that in different silos, and then not having a common data lake and usage, creating a whole lot of problems. So it seems like your data strategy, to me, it seems like that's a second horizon to really think about how do we organize things and what business use cases are we trying to fulfill and accomplish in the long run. And then you have this, this overarching long-term thing, which is how does our whole business transform if we have a totally different relationship because AI makes that possible with our customer. Is that roughly right, or how would you think about that differently?
No, I think Rex, you're absolutely right. There's some quick wins that you can easily get out. By the way, even for I thought about this, and even for employee training, use a chatbot and with ChatGPT or something powering it at the back end, because information itself within the organization to quickly get to information, I think is a key, which makes the entire business very productive. But the data strategy, though, many companies, if they have siloed data everywhere, they have to start now because those are not easy things. And having done this before, it takes a couple of years to actually get this right, which is, how do you build a platform? How do you organize that? How do you build a governance organization? And then how do you get the entire enterprise aligned towards that? That takes a couple of years to do it well, especially if it's a large organization. And so they have to get that going in parallel because that's going to be the key, actually, for the AI to work well.
What's the North Star when you're aligning on the data strategy? What are you telling people they need to be thinking about first to get that journey?
Yeah, everybody talks about customer 360. And I've kind of gone through many customer 360 journeys. It is so interesting when you talk about customer 360. If you ask an organization, what does that actually mean? Everybody will say, well, we want the full 360-degree view of the customer, and we want to be able to service that. So I said, okay, check, that's great. But then I'm like, okay, can you show me how you have kind of thought through of building that 360? Is every touch point that the customer is going through, is that data actually part of their profile or part of their kind of the data set that you're looking at? Well, no, we don't, because customer service has their own systems and logistics has their own systems, and so I would actually obsess because I'm a customer first, customer centric kind of technology leader. I would actually obsess about the customer. How do you want to build out your customer 360 view? And by the way, what does that actually mean from a company standpoint? What are all the different touch points that the customer goes through? Customer service, stores, third party, the digital experiences, all of those. And then make sure that all that data, again, start with the capture strategy, all the data is landing in your data platform. Then make sure that you are able to identify that data by the customer, because sometimes data lands up and you're like, okay, which customer does this data actually belong to? Oh, by the way, we forgot to add the customer ID to it. Well, then that doesn't help at all. So start with the customer and kind of go backwards and make sure that your data strategy encompasses the full ecosystem of where the data is generated, how to capture that, and how to organize that. That's the way I would start off.
Hey, Ratnakar, in your experience, I mean, listen, you've done this a couple of times, different organizations, different styles of organizations, a whole bunch of different things, from product and so on. Do you, in your mind, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but in your mind, do you know what data, in your opinion, has been most valuable? No, I don't know if
Um,
I'm looking for like where to start. I think that because you just did that, so I don't want to go there. But it's like, what's where do you think the real value is? Because it's funny what you mentioned about the customer 360. Oh God, how many times have we heard customer 360? And yet, what the hell really is it? So I love that. But
exactly.
I don't know where do you look? Yeah, what have you seen?
Yeah, I think, the simplest one to start off with most organizations is start with customer and then transactions, right? That's the simplest piece of it,
Okay,
right?
okay,
Then the second piece of it is all the kind of the customer service and complaints or interactions with customer service that customers have, because you can then
hmm
get the sentiment: are they happy, not happy? Are they calling a lot? Are they
okay,
refunding a lot? Kind of thing, right? Then the complex one is actually all the interactions. Take browse, for
hmm
example, take search, because you have to decipher some of the nuances. Because I could have clicked a product when I really didn't intend to click it, or I was not interested in it. But the AI might think, oh, you clicked the product, so you're interested in it, right? So there's a little bit of complexity in deciphering why and why not in the overall interaction piece of it.
hmm
Um, that's the way I would actually think about it. The last piece of it is all the interactions externally, because that's even harder. For example, in social platforms, in kind of Google search and other places, in third parties, how do you capture that, right? So that's the way I generally have thought about that. And that way, at least you first start with the model, and then you start kind of building and enriching it over time.
I love that. I can see it almost
Yeah,
as concentric circle rings where you start with the transaction, because with the transaction and the customer, you can also attach margin and profitability, and you can,
exactly.
and if you have enough of those over time, like a monthly recurring revenue, you can begin to look at lifetime value and predict things like that. So that's a
Right.
great core. And then as you're building it, I love the fact that you went to customer complaints and refunds first.
I love that too. I
Isn't that
totally
good?
agree.
And then
Yeah,
you
that
look
was
at
really
advertising that you're trying to control next. And then, that was really a
yeah.
great insight.
I'll tell you too. What's interesting. Listen, we've not done, we've not done hundreds of podcasts here, but Rex, wouldn't you agree? I think I hear a lot of people started in customer service, that kind of data, the mounds of that data, and trying to decipher it and make it better, both for the customer experience and for their analysis of it. And you're right, you're going to get good sentiment there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
it reminds me also. I'm in one of my first job on the internet with Wired. They put me. I was research guy, and then they put me in charge of customer service. I'm like, what the hell? I don't want. No, these guys are a headache. Do I really have to deal with it? But within a couple of weeks, I'm like, okay, the president was actually really smart when she put me in charge of this, because it's so much good data. It was totally
Exactly.
unstructured, and we didn't know how to deal with it, but we had to figure
Yeah.
out a way of making sense of it, and it really told us a lot more about our product and where we need to go than I would have ever imagined. So I
Right.
think you're onto a right insight there, which is get that data. After you get transactions, do that next.
Exactly. Because then you know the sentiment of the customer. You can then look at the overall sentiment, whether it's product or how you're servicing the customer, and then you can kind of figure out how to improve your business processes.
I also like that you go next. Pretty much, you go into the owned media next, which
Right.
is the touch points on your
hmm
website and what they're doing, and then you're going into some of the earned and then paid
Earned.
media,
Exactly. Earned.
and you're kind of building out that full picture. I think that's really interesting. I think that external data, I would then say, is something else that has to get put in there at some point, because the interaction of what somebody buys might be related to what's going on with the weather outside or what's going on with the
Exactly.
economy and so forth. So that becomes. I mean, the interesting thing is then you get into the question of how do you make sure that you have very, very low latency in all the data you're capturing. I see
Yeah.
some
And
people
and,
who
and
batch
that's the
upload
key
stuff. I'm
key
like, what are
thing.
you doing?
Exactly. If you don't have, again, certain things you need more real time, or near real time, and others you could be like, okay, probably a day later or something like that. For example, weather data, if you have, 7-day forecast every other day or every day, but it comes, as a batch feed, that's fine, right? But like transactions real time so that you can understand sentiment probably needs to be real time, things like that. I think that's why the data strategy is so important in terms of what to capture, how much to capture, how fast to capture, and then how much to retain also becomes important. Because do you retain all the interactions about the customer for forever, or is it good to get some insights for a month or two, and then drop that data, and then capture the new data? So there's a lot of nuance within the data ecosystem itself.
Hey, Ratnakar, it's interesting too because so listen, you got a funny situation in organizations. This podcast is intended for marketers, right? So
Right.
I guess the question I'd ask, the answers about how to get it done and how to get organized, but marketers allegedly are going to know the customer, right? Pretty important.
Exactly.
I guess the question I'd ask you is, what advice do you have for them in working with guys like you who actually can get it done for them? Like
Yeah.
where does that relationship not work, or how do you make it work better? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of challenges there that I've seen. Marketers, unfortunately, I have a lot of sympathy for the marketing organization because they have to show results very quickly, and some of these strategies are longer term. So that's where I think some of the disconnect is between marketing organizations and technology organizations. So I have a lot of sympathy for the marketing organization.
And what do you mean there? Marketers want it. Marketers need results really fast, but technology is like, no, you're not understanding how complex this is to pull off to get there. Is that
Yeah,
where
for
your comment
example,
was going?
data strategy, as I said, it
Yeah,
takes kind of you have to start, and then it takes a
yeah,
year or two to build the
yeah,
data. And the marketing organization, well, I can't wait for a year or two.
yeah,
I need to show results next week or in two
yeah,
weeks, right?
yeah. They're held accountable like that.
But I think there is a way to do it. And the way to do it is, what is the short term kind of objectives? If they like call it CTO, CDIO, if they align with the chief marketing officer in terms of what are the short term objectives that we need to accomplish. For example, we need to kind of increase customer retention, or we need to get more new customers. Let's assume that's the case. Then how do we do that? Well, let's take that data, and we will support you, marketing organization, in enabling you to drive a lot of the growth, but we want to do it in the standards that we think are going to be compatible for the future. That's a great conversation to have, because there's the enablement that meets the marketing need, but there's also a strategy that meets the long-term kind of objectives for the enterprise itself. That conversation has to happen. And sometimes what I find is there's a perception that the speeds are very different, which is the speed and velocity of the marketing organization is way too fast compared to the technology organization. But that need not be the case. The right technology organization can engage and meet the speed of the marketing organizations, but with the long-term strategy in mind. And I think that's what I would say is that's the hard conversations that people should have, so that it accomplishes both objectives. Because eventually, when you build the right platform, the speed and agility actually grows. And marketing organizations can actually do more of the self-service themselves, and they don't need to rely on the technology organization if done right.
That's interesting. Do you run an agile process, and do you think of the CMO or the marketing organization as a product owner, or do you think as the chief data officer as a product owner? There's a saying in agile that you're either the chicken or you're the pig for breakfast.
Right.
Chicken's involved, but the pig's committed.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
how do you?
Yeah, and I think it depends on the organization itself. But in the I always want a business function to do. The way I think about it is the why, and the what. Right? What are the so why do we need a certain capability? Okay, revenue, retention, whatever it is, and then the what capabilities do you need from a business standpoint, and the how and the when should be a response to that from a technology organization. Because if they can meet that, and by the way, the when also is a common thing that they have to negotiate, because they might need it next week or the week after. But then the how is, if you can let the technology organizations meet the needs of the business in delivering that, meeting the timeline, but also thinking about the long-term strategy, where they need to take the platforms and other thing. I think that's the right recipe for it, and hence the product ownership can be in the business, can be in technology, but has to be a blend of the conversation, because one cannot actually function without the other, or they could, but then you get these silos.
Oh boy. Oh boy, I don't know, Rex. Are you over? I don't know.
I
I
love
kind
this
of.
conversation.
I
This
think.
is
I
this
think
is
we.
so
It's the
helpful, I think.
best one ever. Exactly. I totally agree with you.
Well, thank you guys. But I think, I'll tell you, I have a lot of I know there's a lot of complexity in most organizations, um, but I'm one who is like, I'm kind of very positive about where things are going to go, especially. I think the AI conversation in most organizations is going to force a rethink of what actually worked well before, but might not work in the future. And hence, there's going to be a fundamental rethink in how to think about customer, how to think about data, how to think about processes, how to think about experiences. I think there's going to be an entire shift, and that's actually a healthy dialogue in terms of the evolution for most organizations.
Yeah, I think this is such an exciting time. I'm looking at a lot of advances where we're seeing the machine learning type of reporting that you would expect that's predicting what like recommendations, how much of an
Exactly.
impact will that have, how much revenue will that increase, how much profit. But then you're getting this explainable AI layer where the large language model is looking at the data and then giving a summary of
Exactly.
why that's the case and what you could
Exactly.
do next. I think it's going to be a really, I mean, I'm only seeing those in prototypes right now. I haven't seen that
Correct.
come to market yet, but it's a very exciting time.
It is exciting time, and
Right.
I'm playing around with a lot of the Gen AI, and you can do a lot with the technology now. Now it's only going to get better, but even now you can do a lot.
Hey, Ratnakar, you said earlier that a LLM is really expensive. How expensive is it to do, by the way? You're going to do your own. Is there a reason to do it, and how expensive is it? Do you know?
Does MMA have a big check?
Yeah, I think Greg, the starting price I saw is $40 million and up to
40
100
Seriously.
million.
million.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean
Okay. I mean,
you're competing against OpenAI
Right.
and Anthropic and Google, and they're writing very big checks, and the checks are getting bigger every month.
Yeah. It,
okay.
it, it
Okay.
is
Okay.
because
Okay.
it's both the kind of the GPU's cost, and then the storage, because you have to have a lot of data to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Unless there's a clear reason for an organization to do it on their own, I don't think you should, as an organization, you should leverage what is there in terms of open source, because there are a lot of. By the way, also you need a lot of great talent. It's not just like, oh, let's take in all the data and then just build an AI model. You need really smart people to be working on this.
Hey, if
Yeah, I
you were
think
to advise,
they're
oh,
being called
so,
foundational models because now people just say, well, that's foundational. We'll use somebody else's, and then we'll do our own
right.
proprietary stuff in our own space. That's kind of I think that's the
Right.
prevailing wisdom right now.
Ratnakar, you have advice for people on what skills they should be building to be prepared for this new future?
Yeah, I think there are two components, as I've thought through about this. There has to be a component of upskilling people.
Yeah.
The interaction of human and machine is
Yeah.
going to become a bigger and bigger proponent of it, where the machine.
People need to learn to talk to machines. You need to learn how to. That's in essence prompt engineering is what that's currently called. Is that right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
that is correct. But even beyond that, I think is, so one is a prompt engineering. Two is, there's going to be a time frame where the machine makes some sort of an insight or a recommendation, and the human either has to agree to it or correct it, because the machine is still kind of in its infancy and needs to learn and grow, right? So that has to be kind of, that interaction has to be something that people need to understand, they need to train, they need to know how to interact with the machine. The second component of it is having people understand how to actually get the best out of the machine. For example, what
Yeah.
data
Yeah. Yeah.
is right? How do you organize the data? And by the way, what even if the machine is making a recommendation, having the skill set to go deep in to understand why did it make a recommendation? Because you don't want any bias. You
Yeah.
don't want any hallucination that's happening. So skill sets that can introspect what the machine is saying. And then the third piece of it is actually engineering to be able to connect all of this together: the machine, the data, the ecosystem, the digital platforms, and all of that, and getting things real time, making sure that the algorithms are executing in terms of the right customer interaction and things like that. So that's the way I would think about it. And hence, you need skills in all these areas. Some of it is going to be upskilling, some of it is going to be actually maybe hiring new skills from the outside.
Wow. Ratnakar, this is like a master class in how to do this. I mean, I can't tell. Listen, we've interviewed a few people now, and I want to be respectful to the rest of our guests. They won't know who became before this, right, Rex? I think I'm okay there. But really, it's really like the most insightful discussion I think we've had, in both practical and then, also sort of understanding some of the complexity there. Really impressive.
Well, thank you
Really
so much.
impressive. You're the
And
best.
Greg and Rex, thank you so much. And go MMA.